You're listening to another episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Well, thank you all for joining me for an early edition of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood on a very serious topic. And I thought, well, I thought maybe I should address this. I had several people that said, "What do you think about this Dobbs decision on Friday? And what do you think its impact is? And how do you feel about it? And all this other business." And I had guests lined up all week, so I didn't want to bump them for this because they make arrangements on their schedule to be here on the show when they can. So I decided we'll do an extra show. So thank you, Taylor, for getting up this morning. And of course, you get up early anyway, don't you?
Yeah, I try to get up early and get
I
stuff
I try
going
to.
soon.
Yeah, well, I'm not quite as enthusiastic as you are, but there you are. Okay, going to be sharing this with a lot of people today because I think it's important that
Coffee helps with enthusiasm.
well, I guess so. Um, the Dobbs decision is very, to say the least, is very, very controversial and very upsetting to a lot of people. And I'm not really here to rehash the legal reasoning. When the Dobbs decision was leaked about 6 weeks ago, I spent a show talking about what was in that decision, or at least that leaked decision, about what the reasoning was behind it. So I'm not really here to try to make anyone feel better about the decision or worse about the decision. It's been made. It's going to have ramifications, and it's going to be a dramatic change in American society, and in terms of what our responsibilities are in this post-Dobbs era. And I mean our responsibilities, because we're not going to be able to just hand this off to the government. I'm talking about our responsibilities. Now, normally, I get in the call already. Good heavens. Normally, I have the sponsors come on, but I'm not really going to do that now because this is my opinion now. And so I really want to just talk about for myself. And I didn't want people to associate everything with other people. But the point is that the sponsors are like all of y'all. They have various mix of emotions, the whole wide range of emotions. We had a very I've talked to a couple of them, and they, and it's all. I don't really want to relay those conversations to y'all because if you want to know what they think, you can ask them, and that's because that's their opinions. But the point is that they represented to me what's going on in this country, and that is this wide range of excitement and anger. Many supported this decision, many did not, and what I've seen in the last 3 or 4 days has been very, very um, disturbing. The violence, the protests, the anger, the division in families, the division among friends. As social media, of course, is blown up with all of this. Um, all this is disturbing, and I'm going to try to address it as best I can. But again, I'm not going to talk about is this the right decision or not the right decision because y'all have listened to the show long enough to know that I'm pro-life. And I support the bringing the children into the world. But really, I want to address what that means. And I'm really talking more to my Republican and conservative friends than my Democrat friends, because my Democrat friends are already pretty raw over this, and they don't need me to tell them how to feel. They're already pretty upset, and I would just add to that if I try to help them rationalize or make them feel better about all this. They're not. They're going to have to come to this themselves. So I'm really talking about to my Republican and conservative friends. This is something that the Republican Party and many conservatives and pro-life groups have worked for decades. And now that it's occurred, now that it's happened, you've just taken on a major responsibility. You've just taken on a major agreement with society that now that there are going to be more children born into this country, many of which are going to be in poverty situations or are going to have special needs. What does that mean for us? Because we cannot, as Christians, as Americans, And if you want to call ourselves conservatives, we cannot say that's somebody else's problem. And so, really, this is a short show because I'm just going to say to my Republican and conservative friends, you have Democrat friends, or you may have some Republicans that are pro choice that are confused and hurt and angry right now. And the best way to approach them is not with jubilation that this has happened. You could save that for, yourself and like-minded people. But we need to reach out to the people that feel scared by this ruling and say, look, we're not going to abandon you. We're not going to just let you just float along in the waves. We're going to be there. We're going to do our part. And for those who say these aren't our children, you're wrong. They may not be direct descendants of yours. You may not have created the children, but they are our children, our responsibility as a society. It's a responsibility we may not care for or like, but that is a responsibility we took on when we said we're going to take on a pro-life position. You cannot be pro-life and say, well, now that child is born, it's somebody else's problem. That's not pro-life. It may be pro-birth, but that's it. And pro-birth is not pro-life. The idea that we want to bring these children into this world and and then abandon them to poor schools, impoverished situations, and other types of difficulties will make hypocrites of the pro-life position and people who take it. It's hypocritical for us to say, now that the child is born, you're on your own. And it's not just hypocritical, it's harsh. It's mean-spirited to say that's your problem, not mine. That I didn't make the decision to have a child, or I wasn't, I didn't make the decision to engage in the conduct that leads to a child. Therefore, it's really none of my responsibility. That's not it at all. There's nothing in Scripture, and it is nothing really in an appropriate conservative theology or political philosophy that allows for that kind of attitude, that it's your problem, not mine. There's nothing in it should be, rather, let me put it this way, it should be a Republican part of our, platform that, yes, we're pro-life, and that means not just when they're born, but when they're 2, when they're 6, when they're 10, when they're 14. And I'm gonna look at the private and public ways in which people who claim to be truly pro-life can live up to that credo. And a couple of things that, just a couple side notes. A good example will be today's 11 o'clock show. I'm having Eagle's Nest of Guatemala with the McConnells. That's pro-life. They work in an orphanage in Guatemala. That's pro-life. And then Thursday, I have Next Step Women's Center, who provides services for the women that want to have their children. That's pro-life. So it was just a unusual set of coincidences, I guess, that the Dobbs decision comes out Friday, and I have these other shows scheduled that are pro-life in every sense of the word. Um, so my I'm gonna just talk about a couple of things here. I've got my notes here. This is my private recollection. When I was first starting to teach high school in particular, back in the 1990, it was the fall of 1990, was the first year at BHS. I had spent 2 years at Hughes. At BHS, I come in with this attitude that only a certain type of girl got pregnant, one with loose morals or bad family or whatever. I very quickly learned just how arrogant and how ridiculous that attitude was, because I saw the course of my time there all sorts of young men and women get involved in this kind of situation. Women from two-parent homes that went to church, young ladies that were good scholars. I remember one in particular is now a doctor. Also, the young men involved, which sometimes seems to get forgotten in all of this, is that there is a young man involved. And it wasn't just a type; it was for all people. And I got accustomed, and I welcomed it actually when some of these young mothers would bring their children to school because they didn't have daycare. And so there's more than once I'd be up there teaching about Andrew Jackson or some rot, and there'd be a baby in the background. And you try to keep the kids' attention when a baby starts crying. It's not easy to keep their attention on anything related to history, but put a baby back there, it makes it even tougher. But it really changed my attitude about this whole situation. It changed my attitude about the people involved in these kind of decisions. And it took a lot of the hard edges off my ideology. It sanded them right off. Because when you're dealing with human beings, it's not black and white like it says on the page. And people who have such a black and white philosophy of life, whether it be on the liberal or on the conservative side, I don't understand. I really don't. Either side of that equation. Second of all, I think what also helped was changing attitudes in the school system. We created an educational network, an educational support system that will allow for young ladies to continue their education while they're pregnant, even after they have their children. And I remember when it came about, there were some people that were upset by that. Said we should be spending money on such a program. These young ladies, deserve what they get. And I just remember this is like mid '90s. I'm thinking, motivates these people to say such mean things. Most people, though, in Burleson accepted and endorsed this program, the New Horizons program. I don't know if they still call it that now, but it was a program that allowed for these young ladies to continue their education while they had children, and it was a real blessing to say the least. Um, and that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I'll be talking about further, and basically the children of these mothers, once they got into the school, we as a school would make every effort to make sure they felt included and not separated or looked upon differently or whatever else. And so there was a lot of, um, when people say there's a lot of acceptance of this, it wasn't so much that we were endorsing it, but we were accepting it. We understood that these children that were God's gift. And that's what they are. They're God's gift. And if we're going to treat them as God's gifts, then they don't deserve scorn. They don't deserve the back of our hand. They don't deserve to be looked at with a side eye and think, well, that boy's mother is this, that, or the other. None of that. Now, if you want to take this from me as an endorsement of single motherhood, then you're just looking for something to bitch about, tell you the truth, because that's not what I'm saying. The stats will show over and over and over again just how much more difficulty one has in life when you're a single parent. Of any age, not just teenage girl or mid-20s, but any age. The stats will show you over and over again the economic struggle they go through. So I don't endorse this like maybe some Hollywood celebrity who has all this access to resources that most people don't. I'm just saying that this is life in the real city. This is the life the way it is, and we as conservatives and Republicans and Christians need to focus more on what we can do to help and less concerned with making sure we have the appropriate judgment. And I say that because I think a lot of people think that this isn't my child, this isn't my problem, this is nothing I had anything to do with. And I would say to you that attitude is not endorsed by Scripture. It's not endorsed by, I believe, the American creed. Yes, we talk about individualism and all this other business, but also Americans as a society have been incredibly generous over our history. The number of self-help and other type of care agencies, this isn't something new. We've been doing this for decades, for a couple of centuries even, through the churches, through private charities, and now through public spending, which I'll get to at the end. The short answer is this, is that my attitude changed when I saw who was being affected by my hard-edged theology and ideology, and I was embarrassed by it. And now at age 60, I don't endorse single motherhood, but I'm not gonna treat these young ladies and hopefully their fathers, if they stick around, I'm not gonna treat them as derelicts, sinners, whatever you wanna say. Now, what does this have to do with me and you? Two areas, public and private. I'm going with the private. Just sitting here, I could think of 8 different agencies that either you could contribute to or support in other ways that deal with these kind of situations. The Pope home in Fort Worth, most people know it for that beautiful chapel that my daughter got married in fact, and I've been to several weddings there. That beautiful chapel on I-30, but the Lena Pope home provides mental and other health services to young children who can't afford it otherwise. That's pro-life. Also, the Edna Gladney home, the adoption agency in Fort Worth. That's 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 pro-life. Encouraging these young ladies to have their children is pro-life. But once they have them and put it in these kind of institutions, they need our support. I just picked out those 2. There's several that are here in Burleson or at least in Johnson County. I could pick out 5 right here, and some of them I've had on the show. Re-Inspire with Sharice Olson and Shandy Stogsdill. They help foster kids adjust into the adulthood, helping learn how to navigate things that they may not be taught. And you think that these things that they need to be taught, like maybe how to have a checking account, or maybe how to operate a computer better, or maybe just how to take care of the kitchen, or whatever you want to talk about. And they just opened up a spot over in Cleburne in the old St. Mark's Methodist Church. That's an area you could support. That's pro-life because we're going to have a lot more foster kids. We're going to have a lot more kids that are going to need a place. They're going to need homes. They're going to need a place. That's pro-life, is helping out Re-Inspire. The Center for ASD, there are going to be children born that are going to have these kind of autism spectrum disorders. And they just moved into larger space as well, or they're in process of it. And they've been on the show 2 or 3 times. That's pro-life. Not just, money is great. Okay, I'm not going to disparage that one iota, and they'll take it. But other types of support are also necessary. Time or whatever kind of furnishings you can supply, these kind of workspaces or whatever else. But the Center for ASD is a good example. Also, Next Step, like I said, I'm having on Thursday. My goodness, do they do great work in this town. One of my favorite organizations. And they're going to have an influx of young people scared and upset about what this new change means, and they may not have the options that they thought they would have. Next Step is going to provide care for not just the child, supplies and diapers, like they just had that big diaper drive, but they're going to have sonogram services, and they're trying to expand their healthcare clinic abilities, and they're gonna have counseling, and they're gonna have parental classes, and they're gonna have not just for the women, for the young men, and on and on and on. What a great organization. That's pro-life. And also, Burleson Medical Clinic, they just opened up. The one on Haskew, on the northeast corner of the First Baptist parking lot, they're gonna have more children coming into their services 'cause it's not for Medicaid. But it's for those parents at work but don't have insurance, and you're gonna have more of those come in, and they're gonna need help. One day they might even need a bigger facility, who knows? But they're gonna need more, not just volunteers, but their financial assistance as well. Or how about, the Children's Advocacy Center over in Cleburne? They have a fundraiser going on pretty soon. I believe in August. I think it's late August, so you can check out their webpage. I've had them on before. All these things are pro-life. And you say, "Well, what can I do about it?" Well, besides the wallet, which is uh, not a bad thing. I mean, it's something they need is financial assistance. But sometimes maybe just the things could happen, like at Next Step. You're at the store, you buy extra pack of diapers, even though you don't have any children at all, but you just drop it off. Or some of these food pantries like Harvest House or Promises, they're going to have a lot more need, particularly if the economy goes where I think it's going. They're going to have a lot more need for supplies and food. If you have old baby clothes, if you have a skill that you can, lend to re-inspire, like you're a computer person and you know how to operate some of the Microsoft programs, some of their simpler programs, maybe a couple hours at the Re-Inspire Center over in Cleburne at the St. Mark's Methodist Church. I believe it's on Henderson Drive, if I remember right. Things of that nature. Maybe you're good in the kitchen. I like to think I am, but who knows? But maybe you could teach some of these kids some culinary ideas. All these things are pro-life, and these things are gonna be asked more of us, and they should be, because the reason why they should be is because for 49 years, Roe versus Wade has been a controversial, and sore subject for many, many Americans, and they talked about how terrible abortion is. Okay, now that it's gonna be greatly changed in our society, you it's time for you to step up because this is what you wanted. And so I just mentioned 7 different locations that if you say, "Well, I'm not really good around people, I'm really kind of nervous." Well, okay, but there's also the financial end of it, and I'm not gonna disparage that. Donations definitely have their place. Sponsor a child, through Eagle's Nest. Make donations to routine donations to these other organizations. When they're having a fundraiser, either attend it or give some sort of support to it. I remember when Re-Inspire last May were having their fundraiser, several of my sponsors offered, uh, as part of their prize package, some of their services or products, and that's what I'm talking about. Now, as far as the public sector, the county and the state are definitely going to have to pick up their game, and what does that mean for you and me? It means that taxes may not come down as much as you want. I one of the most sore subjects, as the mayor will tell you, as the city council tell you, as a school board member will tell you, is property taxes. But we need to understand that we get what we pay for, and if we try to skim a few pennies off the property tax at the expense of these children, then we're gonna have increased poverty and increased crime and increased illiteracy and probably a perpetuation of the problem. Now people say, "Well, gosh, how much money have we spent over the years since the Great Society programs, and we still have these problems?" Yes, and we're still gonna have these problems. 50 years from now, we're gonna have these problems well into the future because that's the nature of our society, and we can't change that. But the point is that it isn't so much that we just, just throw money at it, forget about it. We need to spend wisely, but we also need to understand that the county and the state need to pick up their game on these things, particularly the state. The state's who I'm looking at the most. I look at our county, and they're quite hamstrung rather by sometimes a lack of funding by the state. And I really get angry with the Republicans in the legislature down in Austin when they strut around about Roe versus Wade being overturned, and yet they're going to try to save a couple of pennies on property tax because some of the more extreme conservative elements of their their party insist on it. We need to spend more money. That may sound like heresy for most Republicans and conservatives, but we gotta spend more money if we're gonna have more children. Money is not the only answer to the solution, but it's part of the answer. There's no answer in total that does not include money. It's like schools. People complain about schools, and yes, they need reforms, they need all these changes, but some of these changes aren't gonna happen without the dollars, and that's just the life in the big city. Same thing with this here. If you want to have a situation where these children are properly taken care of, we need to be less concerned about trying to make sure that the wealthy in this state have lower property taxes. We need to make sure that the poorest in this state are taken care of. The way we can judge our society as how we fulfill both our American and our Christian visions, if Christian is your way of thinking like it is mine, the way we fulfill those visions is by taking care of the least among us. And for Dan Patrick or these other Republican leaders to get up down there in Austin and start talking about how we need to cut the budget, we need to restrain the budget, we spend more money, that we need, we're already spending so much money on X, Y, and Z, then they are making a lie of the pro-life movement that they have been so ardent about all this time. They wanted this decision for decades. They got it. Now it's time to pony up. It's time to take care of these children privately and publicly. We need to have expanded healthcare services for these young women at both the private and public level. We need to expand the Medicaid to take care of these more children that are coming into this society. We need to expand our adoption services and our child protective services. The adoption process, I don't understand why it takes so long to become an adoptive parent. I had several friends have been adoptive parents, and they tell about just what a beating it is to go through the process. I don't know the answer to how to make that less of a beating, but it needs to be less of one. We need to make sure that these young women have the proper prenatal care and postnatal care. Postnatal care. We need to make sure that their children are adequately fed, and that means food programs. People bellyache about the free lunch and breakfast that a lot of kids get over in BHS or CHS or these other schools, and I just say, "What is your problem?" This may be the only meals they get. And so they need to have these lunches provided. This may in the summer, it's a real problem as people at Promises, that outfit at my church will tell you that some of these people, they don't have 3 full meals a day during the summer because they don't have access to school food. And we have, like, these programs at Promises and at Harvest House to try to feed these children during the summer. And God bless them for that. And we need to have, a situation where the young woman can get her education and that as she could continue to move forward. One of the great things I think BISD has done is that early college prep program, because it's designed to get them not just graduate with a diploma in high school, but also an associate's degree. And this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Yes, it costs money to do that. I applaud Dr. Jimerson and the school board for creating that program. Thank you. It's a blessing to our community. And the Bertelsmann Opportunity Fund is also. That's pro-life, helping them get their educations. We, as a county and as a state, need to expand the services to include the fact that the children that come into this world, because we insisted upon it, are going to be adequately fed, adequately taken care of medically, adequately educated. And that goes to another one of the school systems. People talk about how much money the schools spend on non-educational things, and I agree. There's some things there that I wish they didn't spend money on, but that's not really my point. But anything that's spent on behalf of the children is worth it. And we're going to need more teachers. How about that? We're going to need more teachers. We're going to need more kindergarten teachers or pre-K teachers. We're going to need more first, second, third grade teachers, because we're going to have expanded numbers in the schools, because these children are coming our way. As far as any other kind of program, educational program, I know it's real controversial to have sex education in the schools. I think it's necessary. I also made clear we understand each other. I do believe abstinence should be included in that educational process, but I think sex education should be taught. And people get all upset by that because they think that the schools are condoning teenage sexual activity. Two things on that. One, they're not. Second, it doesn't matter. They're going to, and I know, and anybody that's been around even a little bit know that this stuff is going to go on. Period. It's gone on for centuries. It isn't like teenage sexual activity began in the 60s or in the 80s. And so, yes, we do need to have proper sex education in the schools at an appropriate age. At an appropriate age. I believe BISD does it in the 8th grade. That's an appropriate age. I don't think kindergartners need to be subjected to this just yet, or 3rd graders or anything like that. But at the appropriate age, we need to have it. As far as contraceptives, I'm not really crazy about contraceptives in the school, but I do believe there needs to be access for those through the public means, through health clinics and others. I'm not crazy about contraceptives in school because I do think it sends a message that, hey, it's okay, but I think they need to be available in the public means, much more readily available. Not everybody agrees with that point. They think it's basically you're facilitating sexual activity. Well, if obviously by the numbers of children that are being born to young parents or unwed parents or whatever you want to call them, obviously this is going on without our permission or without us condoning it at all. It's going to happen. So yeah, I'm in favor of making contraceptives available, but not through the schools. And the reason why also is because there comes a point in which the schools need to focus on the 3 R's instead of trying to teach everything to everybody. But some people disagree with that. Some people disagree with the provision of contraceptives altogether, and I respect that. But some of my Catholic friends, for example, but um, that's where I stand on that, and that's all I have to say, I guess. I'd like to end this up with, I guess, something positive. Sometimes in our lives as a country, we have a chance to really show ourselves to be what we say we are, Americans, conservatives, Christians, whatever. This is our opportunity. This is the opportunity you've been asking for 49 years. I am pro-life. I welcome these children because this is what I've been wanting for a long time. But now that it's happened, I can't turn my back on them, and neither can you. Pro-life means up into the age of 18, in my view, in all regards. And we will be judged not just by other countries, but by the Almighty, I believe, by how we treat the least among us. And one last thing, this whole abortion problem, whatever, focuses on the young women. There's another thing. I think the young men need to take greater responsibility for the actions they take. I am sick unto death of young men making babies and making tracks. I believe the state should rigidly enforce child payments, family support, rigidly, no kidding around. Deadbeat dads are a disgrace to this country and in this state. They need to be rigidly enforced. Young men, fathers of these children, need to be made financially accountable as well. Too often the burden is fallen and the scorn and the stink eye is given to these young ladies, whereas the dads are basically given a pass. They need to be held fully accountable for the babies they help create. And it means Ken Paxton actually has to do his job which has been a terrible record on child support payment enforcement. A terrible record. Then they need to step that game up big time. Lastly, the city really isn't set up for those kind of programs. They do send people to the nonprofits. They do have a safe baby place at the library and at the fire departments. I would not be opposed if the city of Burleson looked into other ways we could help these children. Now, nothing gets people more inflamed than their property taxes in this town in particular. I'm just saying a lot of those same people were dancing and singing on Friday about this decision. Now it's time to get to work, and it may end up costing some money. I don't know what's been talked about. I haven't talked to the mayor or any council member, so I don't have any inside information. But I will have them on the show, and I'm going to ask them about these things. They're going to be on the show next month, and I'm going to ask them, what can we do as a city to help these young kids that are being born now that decision's come down. So let me just summarize, if you will. We as Americans, and particularly I'm talking to the Republican conservative segment of Americans, need to understand the responsibility we've just taken on by this decision. It was a decision that they advocated for, worked for decades. And now that it's happened, you can't be complaining about all the money that's being spent on them. You can complain how effective it is, or if it's the right program. That's politics. But the base underlying assumption is we need to make sure that these new children that are coming into this world are adequately fed, clothed, and educated until they're adults. That's all I have to say about that. You can't be one or the other. If you're going to be pro-life, you're going to be pro-life all the way to the end. If you're just pro-life until birth, you're a hypocrite. And that's all I have to say about that. Taylor, you still with me?
I am with you.
Yeah, right. I thought you would be. We're going to be on at 11 today to talk to Eagle's Nest, and then this show will be on. I'm going to ask Taylor to put this one on podcast, Apple and Spotify immediately, because I think it's that important. And I know he also has Jamie's is going to be on today too, right?
It'll probably go up at the same time.
Okay, well, you're going to have a double header today, guys. You're going to have a lot. Well, I think this is important enough to get there as quick as possible. Anyway, thank you all for letting me vent my spleen. I hope I explained myself well. I had people praying that I used the right words, and I hope I did. And so we'll see you in a little bit, and we'll see you out there in the social media world. Adios.